I asked Monte Cook Games if I could get a copy of their recently released Cypher System starter kit, but all I got was this lousy hardcover. And now I can't sleep. Hi there fellow roleplayers and game masters, my name is Mr. Tarask, and if you were ever wondering to yourself who does horror the best, the answer is Monte Cook Games. Well, there's a lot of other people who do horror really good. Monte Cook Games is on top of that list, or at least like in the top 5 or something like that. Because today I want to talk about the Magnus Archives role-playing game. This landed on my doorstep only last week or the week before, together with the Cypher System starter kit that I actually asked about, but they delivered this with it because they like me and they just like sending me stuff to potentially review on my channel. And I've sat down with it this week and it is absolutely incredible. Now, the reason that I want to talk about this is mainly because for me the Cypher System, although I create my own fantasy adventures for the Cypher System, because fantasy is just my thing when I write, horror for me is something that the Cypher System really shines in. Well, the Cypher System is actually built to create different worlds, different genres, and play in different worlds and different genres, but horror is just something, I don't know, it keeps returning to me and I keep liking what I'm reading a lot. For example, if you've been on my channel for a while, you know that I'm a big, incredible fan of the Old Gods of Appalachia role-playing game, which is a role-playing game based on the world of the podcast with the same name. So it's Old Gods of Appalachia. It's a podcast on Spotify or wherever you're listening to your podcasts, and it is absolute complete horror. But it is a type of scary person with an axe in the woods and undead people in mines kind of horror, which is great, and I absolutely love the atmosphere that shines off this incredible piece of art that is Old Gods of Appalachia. And that is why I basically want to talk about this today, because they kind of did it again. They took a horror podcast, a really popular horror podcast, kickstarted a campaign, and created a game out of it. Now, I say game out of it, they are of course using the Cypher System based rules to play the Magnus Archives, but it is basically what they did. They take the world of a horror podcast and do something with it. Now, there's more books by Monte Cook Games that tackle horror. For example, Stay Alive is like to tackle horror, but even like Rust and Redemption, which is a post-apocalyptic kind of book, even has like a lot of horror elements to it. And I don't know, the people who work at Monte Cook Games are just really into horror, and they kind of scare me a little bit. Now, this is not in any way a review of this book. It is basically a first impressions video to kind of give you a vibe of what this book is. I haven't read it cover to cover yet, but I've read a great deal of it already, and I'm really liking what it is. Now, I want to start by saying that I did not know what it was until I started reading it. I knew it was a backer kit campaign. I knew it was raising a lot of US dollars. I knew it was a podcast originally, which is, by the way, a great podcast. I started listening to it and it just like gives me the creeps thinking about it. And I knew it was a thing and it existed, but I did not know what it was before I opened this book. So I started reading this book, and what is it and what do you get for your money, basically? Well, for your money, you get, once again, a really big 385 pages thick hardcover, beautiful, the quality we expect from Monte Cook Games, the smell we expect from Monte Cook Games, everything is just perfectly, incredibly laid out and written and done. It is a book based on a horror podcast, so it is everything you need to play the game. So in order to play a game in the world of the Magnus Archives, you only need this book. It has the Cypher System rules, it has classes, it has the subclasses kind of thing. They're not called subclasses. It has like all of the Cypher System stuff to build your character. It has the Cypher System rules. It has all of the exceptions to the rules, especially designed for this book. It has monsters. It has 2 adventures. It has all of that stuff, and it is all based on the world of the Magnus Archive podcast. Now, before we take a deeper look into the PDF and I show you why I like it, 1 or 2 things that I like about it and how it's all set up and presented, I want to talk about like what the world of the Magnus Archives actually is, because I didn't know that until like 2 weeks ago or something like that, right? The Magnus Archives, man, that's really hard to pronounce when you say it a lot. Magnus Archives is basically it's an institute, the Magnus Institute, and they have a bunch of archives of people who have been through something that they think comes from like the supernatural or something like that. So instead of going to the cops, who probably won't believe you and think you're freaking crazy, or instead of going to the government or whatever because everybody thinks you're crazy, you go to the you go to the Magnus Archives, right? And the Magnus Archives, they collect everything that is that you say and all of that. They put that in like a letter that you supposedly have written them, and they put that in the archives. And they have archive people who then take out some of these cases and go study those cases and see what's going on and try to make sense out of the situation that seems supernatural, kind of like X-Files kind of stuff going on, right? Which is absolutely cool. But what happened is that although the podcast, it centers around like an X amount of cases and the people have to go and figure out what happened with those cases and all that stuff, it is an entire archive thing. So there is many cases that aren't like cleared up or anything, and that is where the players come in, right? So the players are basically people who work for the Magnus Institute or who are hired externally by the Magnus Institute, whatever you want to build your character around, what ID you want to build your character around, and you as a GM basically give them like a hook. You give them like, here is one of the archive thingies, one of the stories of somebody that came in and gave us this, and this is what happened to them. And then the players go out and see what actually happened. And that is when they get themselves in this horror situation. And that is what I like about this compared to, for example, Old Gods of Appalachia. Old Gods of Appalachia is right there. Old Gods of Appalachia is more the... feels more like the haunted mansion, haunted mine, slasher, zombie kind of stuff, while this feels more like X-Files and crazy like investigation stuff, where then they find something supernatural and they have to kill or defeat said supernatural thing, and it all gives you the goosebumps, and it is all presented in a freaking cool way. So that is where this podcast shines really well, because although in the podcast they follow like the lead character who is one of those investigators, they go out, investigate stuff, there could be other people working for a Magnus Institute or for one of the other Magnus Institutes that you decide to put on planet Earth. It is all played, of course, in like our world now. You can play it in the 80s, you can play it in the 50s, you can play it in the early 2000s, you can play it right now, this day and age, but there's just like this supernatural thing going on, and people kind of like give you stuff that happened to them and you need to investigate, which is really cool. Now there's a few bits of very important information that I want to give you before I jump into the PDF, and that is, first of all, you can get it as a print, you can get it as a PDF, but you can also get the player's guide. Now the player's guide does not have anything original or new in it. Everything that is in the player guide is, if I'm not mistaken, I could be like completely that wrong, put it in the comments below, but like Old Gods of Appalachia, the player guide thing is all the player stuff that is in this book, but you don't want your players to have this book, you can give them the player's guide. And there's also a free preview on the website, so if you're still on the fence after this video or whatever, there is a free preview, link is in the description below. And that brings me to the PDF of the Magnus Archives, the role-playing game. As you can see, it has this vibe going on, the cover has this vibe going on of like this investigation thingy. It's not really like a cops who investigate stuff, it's more like people who are really good at investigation, drink a lot of coffee, even have a set of dice for some reason, pencils, you know, markers, all kinds of folders, and a recording machine. And this is really important about the Magnus Archives, because this is about the statement. Everything revolves in the Magnus Archives revolves around a statement, and I think that is really cool. If you play it in the modern day and age, this statement could have been made on a freaking cell phone and just people calling in and making a statement about something that happened or they saw happening or whatever. But if you play it more like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, it could be like one of those cassette recording machines that people of my age have used when they were young, basically. Now, as any proper book based on a podcast that Monte Cook Games as a company does, it has all of the cipher system rules in it. So the first 7 chapters. No, there's 8 chapters. The first 8 chapters of this book are cipher system rules. Now, don't get me wrong, the cipher system rules are written in a way that they make sense for this game. So they're basically like parts of it are rewritten, and also there's some other rules. There's some rules that are changed, and there's some variations on rules, kind of like the horror mechanic in in what book is it? Is it in Stay Alive? The horror mechanic. Anyway, all of that kind of stuff is also in here to make sure that the rules actually apply to the Magnus Archives role-playing game, which is something that's very cool about the cipher system. You can just take like the cipher system engine and apply it to anything, and then make some rules for that specific, I don't know, genre or world or whatever thing you're playing in. From that on, chapter 9 all the way up to chapter 16 is all about the Magnus Archives, and it starts with the statement, and this is something really cool. So like I said, the Magnus Archives is the Magnus Institute, is an institute that collects statements from people who've seen or been through something supernatural, and those people don't go to the cops or to the government or whatever, because though the government or the cops will probably say like, oh, that woman was freaking crazy, she thought she was attacked by some kind of zombie creature or whatever. So they make a statement for the Magnus Institute, but there are like thousands of statements in the archives, right? So that's a cool thing about it. In the podcast, like I said, in the podcast, they go through a lot of these statements and they clear this up, and they do investigation and all of that stuff. But there's thousands more, and this is where the players can make a player character who works for the Magnus Institute and needs to take some of those statements out of the archives and try to come up with a solution of what happened, why it happened, and how it happened, and maybe defeat the supernatural thing that is behind it, basically, right? So I think that is really, really, really cool. I don't know why it takes me to the monsters when I click statement. Why did it do that? What? So I think they should, change their thingies, their hyperlinks. So 150. The statement right here, the statement. So this is where it all starts. So as you can see, and this is really cool because they talk about how you can create a statement with your party. So normally you would think a GM comes up with a statement, right? There's this entire letter from a person who's been through something supernatural. But you could also come up with that as a party. And they have this entire section of how you do that and how you can have like this back and forth. So the statement begins. We get a name and a basic suggestion of the statement other's personality. Then the second player does the setup. The third player does the fleshing things out. The GM interjects to make some adjustments. Then the statement author reacts. Then there is a twist, and so on to come up with the statement. Now, I wouldn't do this personally, but I think it's really, really cool to have this in here. But other than that, so yeah, that's the statements. And there are actually adventures in the back. Let me just really quickly go there. There's adventures in the back, just so that you can see one of those statements. My favorite adventure of the two is Liquefy. I don't really like the Resurrection Mount. Not that it's badly written or anything. I just don't like it as an adventure. It's just not my cup of tea. But Liquefy is really, really damn cool. It is probably right here, adventure number 2. Liquefy is an investigative scenario suitable for beginner characters, but might be better if they had some experience. So there's a synopsis, there's a background, but there is the statement. This is the statement. This entire bit is somebody who talks about what happened to them and all of that stuff. And the cool thing about this is, and this is where I really, really, really like it, there's a voice actor who reads these statements, and you can play that for your party. Even cooler, if I'd have a party of people who are really into horror, I would send them this statement late at night. And I would be like, listen to this now, like in your bed or whatever, and they will start getting the vibe of what is going on, right? So there is, my name is Timothy Dunn, and I'm dead. Not like, oh man, my wife is going to kill me, but like, really dead. Here's the thing, I don't know who killed me, or how. knowing that won't save me. Nothing will. So why am I recording this? Justice? No, I don't think so. And so on and so on. And there's this voice actor who does that. And that is what I really... There's a lot to like about the Magnus Archives role-playing game. And I want to go deeper into it in like a more review videos. But this is where it's all about. And I think setting that up, that is what horror is. Horror for me is the suggestion of stuff. Of course, this adventure ends in something supernatural, and there's supernatural stuff, and they need to like defeat that or come up with a solution for that. But it all starts super suggestive, and you can take like your brain can take like a lot of routes, and that is also why I like suspenseful horror movies better than I like, for example, slasher horror movies and that kind of stuff. I like Jaws, I like Jurassic Park, I like that kind of stuff more, and that is where I get that feeling with this role-playing game. Like, you have this entire statement, and when you read it and you do not know what the adventure is about, your brain goes absolutely everywhere. Now, the chapter after the statements is chapter 10, the entities, and this is where it all gets a little bit vague, but it actually makes sense once you read the chapter from start to finish. So the entities are basically as abstract beings of cosmic horror, are believed to be responsible for supernatural phenomena and use those to evoke fear from victims and thereby sustain themselves. So there are these entities who do not have bodies, who do not have figures, who do not have forms. They are entities, and that is where fear comes from. And as long as people fear those entities can remain to exist. As a matter of fact, the more people that fear one entity, the stronger that entity becomes. Basically, they are beings of cosmic horror. At least that is what the people of the Magnus Institute believe. So there is a bunch of these. There's the buried, the corruption, the end, the eye, the dark, the slaughter, the flash, the hunt, the desolation, the spiral, the lonely, the stranger, the vast, the web, and the extinction. These all represent different types of fear. But all of these are one separate cosmic entity. All of these together used to be one cosmic entity because there were only animals, and animals only know the fear of being killed or getting eaten. That's the only fear an animal knows. But once humans started walking the earth, it split apart into different types of fear because humans are intelligent, and intelligent people have more fears. That's just how. I'm completely murdering it. You need to read it to like fully understand it. That's the base of it, right? And all of these have like. So there are the individual entities right here. I don't know why my computer is. Okay, individual entities. Can you still see this? Let me double check that. Yes, you can still see this. So, for example, the buried, right? These are other names for the buried. The fear the buried brings involves being crushed under the weight of something else, such as dirt, water, rock, or even money. It is the opposite of the vast, while it seems somewhat related to the lonely. So fears that come from the buried are claustrophobia, suffocating, drowning, being buried alive, everything crashing down, or being trapped. That's one of the fear manifestations. Caves are a manifestation of the buried. So it's actually the entity that creates those manifestations on the planet Earth to create those fears. That's basically how it goes. Caves, dirt, financial issues, which also you can be buried, figuratively speaking, under financial issues, heavy rain, underground transport, tight spaces. So yeah, they talk about avatars from the podcast who are avatars of the buried and so on, and a ritual. So all of these have basically a ritual to give these a form on Earth, and for that to take over the world, basically, if that ritual would ever come to pass. These rituals are hard to do, and yeah, all of these are in here. For example, something that's really interesting, there's the anti-eye, all of that's the hunt, the flash. Look at this fucking, the lonely, like there's the lonely, for example, but the vast is almost like the opposite. They say that it's the vast. So this is almost the opposite of the buried. The vast is the fear of being lost in too much space. It is a dread that comes from feeling insignificant, but it's also tied with something as mundane as the fear of heights. The vast is antithetical to the buried, but it can be related to the flesh. So fears, heights, falling, open spaces, sky, space, deep water, voids, insignificance, meaninglessness, or being lost. Manifestations, voids, spaces, vertigo, falling, finite converting to infinite. So that is, I think this is a really, really interesting way of looking at, like, there is different manifestations in this cosmic thing we are in, and these manifestations all have their own their own fears tied to them. And if you fear that fear, the entity becomes stronger, and there are more manifestations that pop up, and so on and so on and so on. For this is like the vast. This could be like for the vast, because people might be afraid to be alone in the world or stuff like that. I absolutely love this section, and it really, it really gives like touch and feel to something that would otherwise be super vague. If they could have done this section in like 2 or 3 pages and bring the message, communicate the message, but it would be still too vague for my liking. And this really, especially that section where they are all split up, really gives me that touch that I need in order to actually make sense of it. I know I'm not making sense in what I'm saying, but you know what I'm saying. Last thing that I want to do for now, for this video, is take a look at the monsters and NPCs in this book for this role-playing game, because they are really cool, but there is something that's really important about them tied into the entities. Now, if you want more Magnus Archives content on my channel, you want me to take a deeper look into, like, I don't know, the classes and all of the powers and the player options and other stuff from the Magnus Archives role-playing game, hit the thumbs up, put it in the comments, subscribe under this video, subscribe to my channel under this video, so then my analytics tell me that you like this type of content, basically, right? Monsters and NPCs, and this is where it gets really crazy. Some of these are, so there's a bunch of monsters in here, from like the super mundane to like the really wicked one, the anglerfish. There is the archivist, who's just like an NPC. It might be the archivist, the lead archivist of the Magnus Archives, where your characters might be like the person who's directly above the player characters that are playing the game, artifact dealer. And then it becomes really weird. Like, there's this monster, Bewebbed Puppet. So this is a monster, and unlike the Desolation and the Dark, these are like the entities. The web doesn't often use cultists. Instead, its minions, once regular people, are spider-filled puppets that enact minor elements of the Weaver's plan without question. Related entity, the web. So that's how it works, right? This is a monster created by the web, and the web is one of those cosmic entities that has certain fears tied to it. One of those fears is the fear of spiders. Is that arachnophobia? Arachnophobia, I'm going with it. So it has a monster tied to it, and all of these entities have monsters tied to them. There's the Flash, has something like the Bone Turner. This is just like a book collector, buried thing. So that's the entity is the buried, right? And all of those, these are all like manifestations, avatars, if you will, of these entities that bring supernatural stuff to our material world, and then supernatural stuff happens to people. Those people put that in a statement. It's dropped off at the Magnus Institute, and they go and research that, and they end up defeating or making sure to get rid of said thing. Because, yeah, most of these things are things, right? So there's cultists, all kinds of NPCs and monsters. There's Death himself, who is related entity, the End, right? That kind of stuff. So yeah, it is actually some of these monsters and some of this artwork is like really horror. Yeah, look at this. disciple of the endless. It's something related entity of the vast. There's like this artwork of a person being all alone in like, I don't know, it's an ocean or the void itself, that kind of stuff. Now, if you're interested in playing or running the Magnus Archives role-playing game, check the link in the description below. But there's one more really important thing that I want to say. This is horror. Don't just toss this on the table and expect everybody to be okay with this. Certain subjects in this book even come with a content warning. As a matter of fact, both the adventures in here that I want to take a deeper look at in another video come with content warnings about like, oh, there's children in danger in this section, or there is like graves and that kind of stuff in that section. Make sure the players at your table are okay with playing certain subjects. In the final bits and pieces of this book, I think it's the second to last page before the index. No, it's the last page. There is a consent checklist. Make sure to fill that in. I know it sounds a little bit goofy. Of course, if you've been playing with people you've known for like 20 years, it might just be okay. Like, hey, is it okay if we play this game? It's horror. It's going to be scary. If it's too scary for you, just tell me. If they're your best friends, right? But if there are people that you know but don't really know super well, the consent checklist is something that I can really tell you could be really important, and it could like lead up to really fun playing sessions because you as a game master know where you can go and where you can't go. Click the link in the description below if you're interested. If not, don't do that. And if you're interested in more Magnus content on my channel, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, put it in the comments, and until next video, bye.